Hi guys, welcome back to the Resilience Pod. You're here with me, your host, Reena Singh. Thank you to each and one of you for tuning in today, whether you are listening to us or watching. I am eternally grateful. Now, today on the pod, we have another awesome role model in the resilience industry sitting right next to me. He has a background in information security, cybersecurity, GDPR, governance, data protection as well, which I've just said, and business continuity. He has won a lot of awards and I have to say is a fantastic speaker and presenter who I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with. He is the expert in helping you do business safe in the cybersphere. Please welcome in joining my very next guest on the Resilience Pod, the Professor of Communicating Cyber, Gary Hibberd.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lovely introduction. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming on the Resilience Pod. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah,
Good.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Excited to have you here. Now, before we set off onto the interview, as always, everybody who comes on has this mood book in front of them, and Gary is going to flip through it right now to tell us what emotion he is feeling before the interview starts. So fingers crossed for something very positive. So,
Indeed, okay.
So he's flicking through it right now, choosing.
Okay, I'm going to stay with this one. So this is chipper.
Yay.
So I'm feeling chipper
Yeah,
today.
okay. And why are you feeling chipper just now?
Because it's the start of a fantastic day. I've been interviewed by your good self. I'm always interested to talk to people about business continuity and resilience and all these things. And I'm a happy-go-lucky guy, I guess.
Great. So Gary is feeling chipper. That's great. So now we're going to get off and start with all the interviewing of the questions. So Gary, back to basics. What was your very first job?
So my very first job, I left school at the age of 16. Okay. Didn't go to university. I went straight into work, and I was an IT programmer.
Oh.
So I was kind of it was a bit of a mix of several things. So I started out as an office junior, but part of the role that I was expected to take on was programming their IT systems, or just supporting their systems. I started learning computer programming languages and such from the age of about 14 or 15.
Wow.
And when I went for this job as an office junior, and I told them that I could program in Fortran and Pascal, they actually said, well, we've got a system actually we need, or a set of systems that we need to have automated. So can you write a program? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So in amongst making cups of tea and doing the filing and the post and all the rest of it, it was learning how to apply what I'd learned academically in my own time to actually solve a business problem.
Wow, that's amazing. So moving on from your first job then, how did you come into the whole resilience field?
Well, that actually is a fairly long story and journey, but I'll keep it as brief as I possibly can. But it did all start with that original learning about IT and about systems and such. When I was a programmer, I very quickly, because I worked for a small organisation, I very quickly then had to support some of the underlying infrastructure. Right. So that was then, another opportunity to learn about how networks operated and how systems spoke to each other. And this is in the early days of the internet and networks and such. So learning what a LAN was, local area networks, and then suddenly that became a WAN, a wide area network. And how did different networks speak to each other? And from that early days of programming, I did everything from learning how to program systems, obviously, then learning how to support networks, how to build PCs. Worked for many organizations, all doing very similar sorts of pieces of work. So everything from system administration through to network architecture design, through to network support. Wow. And all the while constantly just looking at helping people to solve business problems. So that journey probably took me working for many different types of organisations for about 15 years, about 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
And then I had the fortunate situation to work for an organisation where I was working more and more with the business continuity lead in that organisation.
Okay.
I was supporting the networks and supporting the security side of things. And they said, actually, I'm leaving the organisation. Gary, would you like to take on business continuity as well? And that was the first opportunity, really, to go from just looking after one particular discipline to doing business continuity and information security. Right. So suddenly I was arching across what were previously two separate disciplines. Yeah. And then my job was to try and bring them closer together. So ever from that point onwards, I was talking about organisational resilience and saying we can't just be focusing purely on this over here. We also have to look at these problems as well. So that's how I got into resilience.
Wow. And actually, if you think about all the experiences Gary said, he was kind of doing resilience before the word even was a buzzword in the industry, and looking at it from a whole and trying to break down the silos, which still is an issue right now.
I completely agree. Starting that word resilience really became something that I was looking at for my entire career, I would suggest, in this discipline. Okay. So about 20 plus years, I was already talking about organisational resilience and being resilient to change, whether that change be fast or slow, because obviously in business continuity, as we know, a crisis can be fast or slow. Yep. So it was that same sort of thinking, and it was about breaking down barriers. So I would happily go and have conversations with the compliance teams and the risk teams and the IT teams, always trying to spread out my tentacles into those areas and trying to bring people together to have those conversations.
Interesting. So Gary, you're just saying that you went out and spoke to all these different areas to kind of break down the silos, but what specifically did you do? Some takeaway tips for our viewers or anyone who's listening that helped you kind of be successful in that sphere?
It sounds quite trite, I guess, but I suppose one of the approaches is about communication. Okay. I know it sounds very basic, but it's about understanding people's own position, understanding where they are on this journey, understanding how you can help them, what are the barriers to them achieving what they're trying to achieve. So understanding the position of the risk manager or the data protection officer, understanding the role of the head of IT, what are their objectives. So looking at it from their position and then saying, well, I can help you with this. Let me help you by connecting you with another team who can support you to help you look good, help you achieve your objectives. So it sounds quite trite, it sounds very basic, but it is about communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're doing this as a day job, it's what I'm hearing is don't just go there and try and push your own agenda, find out what makes people tick first. It's that human element of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is it really, I suppose, as a tip, if you like, is to understand someone else's position first, seek to understand and then to be understood. You know, those sorts of very wise words. And I think if you can do that, then you're building relationships, and people will be willing to open up about their true worries and their true concerns about either their role, their position in the organisation, their own fears about what they are actually trying to do. And if you can break those barriers down by having an open and honest communication, then you'll start to find that the gaps will get smaller because you're bringing people together.
Absolutely, that's good stuff, guys. And if you've tried this, or you're having issues with this, or you've got some success stories, then drop me a note, because it's always good. We're about sharing here on the pod, and let me know or let Gary know, because, well, we want to see if these things are working and if you're facing the same challenges. On the pod today, we have, and what I touched on earlier, is the professor of communicating cyber. So the famous one here sitting next to me. Now, I'm really curious to know how this title came about. So please do share.
Okay. It's an interesting story. Well, I think it's interesting. I've been the head of business continuity and information security manager, and I have had very long titles in the past. And they never really truly suggest what I do.
Okay.
And then, so I've always struggled with that sort of
Okay.
title. So I've been a managing director, and I've done head of sales and head of sales for business continuity and various different things. I do a lot of talking about cybersecurity. I think most of my friends and colleagues would agree that I can talk quite a bit about this topic.
Okay.
Now, one friend of mine who is was the dean of Leeds Met University, we were at an event for the university, and we were talking about cybersecurity and resilience and business continuity and such. And through that conversation, he was saying to me, "So can you explain to me how encryption works and cryptography?" So I was talking to him about this. And then we got talking about things like Facebook and about WhatsApp and how these things work. And then I was explaining to him how I was at a primary school explaining to 4 and 5-year-olds about how Facebook operates.
Okay.
And about how social media operates and such. And he just looked at me and he said, "Gary, do you know what? You are the Professor of Communicating Cyber." So I took a step back and I said, I love that. I said, "I love that title." I said, "Is that a real thing?" And he said, "Well, it's an honorary title that we give to people who understand a topic at such a level that they can explain it in layman's terms, so that anyone from children up to adults can understand the topic." So I said, "Well, it's a fantastic title. I love it. One day I'm going to get to use that." And I'm lucky enough now to work for Cyberfort, who have me operating across the entire business. So I don't sit within the sales and marketing team. Okay. I'm not just a consultant, although I do have my own clients. And I operate within the products and services part of the business. So when I was given this role within Cyberfort, they actually said to me, "Gary, you don't fit neatly into any one particular box. So would you like to come up with your own job title?" So I just sat there for a moment and I thought, let me just try on the Professor of Communicating Cyber jacket for a second. It seemed to work, it seemed to fit, and yeah, that's where it came from, and that's why I use it to this day.
It's quite an awesome title. I think you guys will agree. We just need a hat on you now, and it will be like the perfect fit for the Professor or the Professor of Communicating Cyber. Is that you're like that image?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll have to go and buy one.
Yeah, you will. So there you go, Resilience Pod viewers and listeners. You heard it first through this channel, the Professor of Communicating Cyber, and how he became one. So how interesting is that? So keep listening and watching and stay tuned for more. Following on from this amazing work experience that you've had and all these fancy job titles you have, and now being the Professor of Communicating Cyber, throughout your career, what kind of key challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them?
That's a really interesting question, and I guess I would go back to something I said earlier, which is about the communication. Some of the key challenges are communicating. I mean, again, that word is in my job title, so the Professor of Communicating Cyber. So I must know something about how to do it, but it's taken a long time.
Okay.
So some of the challenges are communicating in a very human way about a topic which, let's be honest, some people do find quite dull, quite uninspiring. So it's quite technical at times. But some of the challenges are just getting the message across that this is not a technical problem, that this is a business risk, it's a business issue, and that every area of the organisation needs to play a part in helping to build resilience into the organisation, and to get better at responding to fast or slow changes. So the challenges have always been around people management and that communication. Yeah.
In your career, then moving on from that, have you ever faced that imposter syndrome where you felt like, am I good enough, or do I know what I'm doing? Because I'd be really interested to get your take on that.
Every day.
Every day? Really?
Every day.
Okay,
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
It's I'm my own worst critic.
Okay.
Absolutely, every day I look at what I've done and say, is it good enough? Could I have done better? I always seek feedback from the team about, you know, whether a presentation has gone well, how they felt it went. Could I have done something better? And I think that's what drives me to do more, to try and learn more, to try and be better than I was yesterday. So I don't look at other people and say I need to be better than him or her. What I think is I need to be better than I was yesterday. I need to learn more. So I'm always reading. I'm always checking my knowledge and checking myself to make sure that I'm headed in the right direction. So yeah, imposter syndrome, I would say that is alive and healthy within me. We've learned to coexist, but absolutely. But again, that's what helps drive me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because there's a lot of challenges around that, women facing that within the industry. So it's really interesting to get like kind of the opposite genders take on it, because there was some studies, and I've been on a course recently that said it's always women that have this and they're not very good at it. So I feel like it's an important enough question to ask.
I think it's a great question.
Man, about how he feels about
that. I think it's a great question, and I think if most people were honest, you know, men and women, they would admit to feeling those feelings at one point or another in their career. So I have to, for me, it's something that I've worked on for many years. As I said, we happily coexist, me and my imposter self, but it is very much about learning to work together and realizing that actually I've worked hard to get where I am and to get the recognition that I've got. You know, and it's that sort of self-work, I think, which is very important as well.
Definitely. Okay, so earlier you touched on the fact that you hadn't been to university, but when I'm sat here speaking to you, and when we've kind of our interactions and just looking at what you've done throughout your career, has not going to university impacted you, and has it been kind of a blessing in disguise, or do you wish you had gone to university?
It's a good question. I think in terms of a blessing or not, I mean, I don't know, because I never went to university. I was able, when I was at school, I was the class clown. I didn't really find my place or what I wanted to do for quite some time. I come from Sheffield, so the Steel City, so my parents had fairly low aspirations for me. There were none of my two older brothers had gone to university. They had gone straight into working in manufacturing, into steel. Wow. So there was no real sort of pressure on me to do anything academically. So I didn't. So there was no real issue. So when I left school and just went straight into a job, it was just that was kind of what was expected at the time. You've got to remember, this is 35 plus years ago. Did it affect me? Yes, absolutely, because one of the things I did realise is that I messed around so much at school that academically I needed a lot of catching up. Okay. So I found myself where a lot of people were either at university or enjoying good jobs because they'd got lots of A levels and such. I went back to do night school, and I did lots of self-study. So one of the things it did give me is a ferocious appetite for learning and self-development. Okay. So at school, for instance, I didn't really enjoy school that much. So I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. But I did play truant once in a while. But instead of just going and playing at the mall or the shopping centres or whatever, I actually went to the library and actually studied. Wow. Okay. And studied computers and languages and such, because they were topics that I was interested in. So university, not going to university, gave me just a realization that if I was going to learn anything, I had to do a lot of that myself, a lot of self-development. And 35 plus years on, I'm still constantly striving to learn new things and looking to expand my knowledge and understanding.
Absolutely. And at what point or what age, Gary, did you come to that realization that you wanted to kind of embark on this self-study and learn more?
That was the at the early stages, to be perfectly honest. Ever since 13, 14 years old, when I started, when I really discovered computers,
Yeah.
I just recognised it was something that I was really interested in. It was an emerging world. It was a bit geeky.
Yeah.
Not many people knew about it, so it's kind of cool, a bit nerdy, and I like that.
Okay.
So I've always been studious, but only on language, only on topics that I find interesting.
Right. Okay.
So if I don't find it interesting, I'm likely to shut down and just sort of say, right, okay, that's not for me, move on into something else. Okay. So it was always from a very young age that I knew that self-development was something that I was going to have to do, but became very aware that I had to work harder at it once I'd left school. And at that time, I still remember looking back and thinking, yeah, I wish I'd paid attention a bit more at school and taken parts in those classes, whereas I was probably more absent than I should have been.
Okay, but then that doesn't stop you moving forward, because you've kind of broken down those barriers, to say, and realised that and done the study, and and you are where you are today because of that.
Absolutely, and although I didn't go to university back then, I do go and I work with universities now.
Great.
And I'm helping several universities with their students, the MBAs, looking at resilience and business continuity and cyber. So I'm actually going and lecturing at universities now, something I don't know, if that would have been possible if I hadn't been so studious and worked so hard. Yeah.
So that's very inspiring. Thank you for sharing that with us. Resilience. What does it mean to you personally?
It's such a big word, resilience. I know in business we talk about it being the ability to respond to fast or slow change and such. I think being resilient is, in a similar way, the way that I approach it on a personal basis is being able to move forward in a positive way.
Okay.
Without it affecting you in a negative sense, whether it be your family or those around you. Being able to move forward resiliently means to expand your thinking.
Okay.
To be able to include other people. So you don't get to my age without having some tough times, some personal tough times and tough challenges in your personal lives and such. And for me to be able to get through those times in a resilient manner meant drawing on the knowledge and expertise and friendship and love of those people around you.
Okay.
That enabled me to take one step forward.
Okay.
Someone very famous, whose name I can't remember right now, once said that it's not about seeing, if you're traveling through fog, it's not about seeing the entire road ahead of you. It's about seeing 10 yards ahead of you.
Okay.
And then seeing the next 10 yards and then the next 10 yards. And I think, so resilience to me just means about moving forward positively so that you ultimately achieve your goal without affecting negatively people, you or those around you.
I like that. Yeah, thank you. It's another interesting take on it. So moving on, we've discussed quite a lot of things, especially the most interesting part was your kind of educational background, and then the imposter syndrome, and then what resilience means to you. But what if I'm new into the industry? What tips would you give our newbies out there who are either watching us or listening?
Okay. You can never know too much about this industry.
Okay.
I think understanding what resilience means to yourself and also to your organisation, I think, is really important.
Okay.
But read broadly. Don't just read just purely one discipline. So look at books around finance, sales and marketing. Look at operations. Understanding your sector that you're operating in and indeed outside of your sector. So always looking to expand your knowledge. I think that's the one thing the first tip I would say. I think part of that as well is build relationships. Learn how to communicate with other people, work in other groups so that you can actually communicate as effectively outside. If you're an IT person, for instance, it's sometimes quite difficult for IT people to break out of that very techno babble sort of, that's the place that they feel most comfortable. Break out of that, learn how to speak, in a good, business fashion, speak plain English, don't speak in acronyms and such, and learn how to communicate, I think, on a very human level. Those are the kinds of things, I think, that those skills will never leave you, and they will carry you on through your entire career. So those are the two tips, I think, the key ones I think will help anyone.
Fantastic. And you guys, you have to take note of this, because this is coming right from the professor of communicating cyber. So you really can't go wrong with that, because we're talking to an expert on this. Right. So if any of our viewers or listeners have some questions for you or just want to know a bit more, where can they find you, Gary?
Well, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, on social media. So you can find me, just search for my name. If you want to include a link, please do.
Yep.
You can email me at gary.hibberd@cyberfortgroup.com. Again, if you could include a link, that would be great.
Absolutely.
But LinkedIn is probably the typical place people start to follow me. At least there you can follow some of the articles that I put out and some of my thoughts. And if you have any questions, please do reach out, and I'd be happy to help always.
Thank you. No excuses. If you want to get in touch, then you've got pretty much an open invitation there. So
Absolutely.
do take advantage of that. And if you do, let me know as well. Books, as you all know, I always ask this question because it's one of my favorite things. So I've asked Gary today to bring his current favorite book on the pod, and he's got it here with him, and I'm excited for him to share with us what he's reading at the moment and find out why.
Okay. So the book I'm reading, I actually read about 3 or 4 books at once. So I had to choose one that I find particularly of interest.
Yep.
So this is the one I was looking at just last night. It's called Nobody's Victim.
Okay.
Its subline is Fighting Psychos, Stalkers, Pervs and Trolls. Which it sounds a little bit strange, but I'll explain in a second. It's by Gary Goldberg.
Okay.
It's a very interesting read, and actually speaks quite a lot to what we've been talking about today.
Okay.
Which is that what Carrie has done is she's talking about cybersecurity. She's talking about data breaches and such. But rather than just talking about the impact of a data breach and cyber stories and such, what she's doing is she's a lawyer, and she has taken some really interesting situations and cases that she's worked on over the years, and she's telling a story. And through the narrative of various different incidents that she's investigated and worked on, she's giving a warning about the future and about where we're headed and about what we're doing around cybersecurity and such. So it's a very timely book in as much as, we need to be thinking about the impact of social media upon us, and fake news and such, and the impacts on our self-worth and our self-worth of children through trolls and those kinds of things. But the reason why I think this is particularly relevant today is that it's just another demonstration of what I try and do, which is look at our discipline, look at cybersecurity, data protection, business continuity, resilience and such, through stories and how they're communicated to us. So don't always think you have to follow a set pattern when you're communicating about this topic. Tell a story. We are, that's something we've done since we sat around the campfires of thousands of years. We've told stories, and they're the things that resonate with people. So connecting with people on a technical topic, I think, is extremely difficult, and I think Carrie's done it extremely well through this book. So that's the reason why I chose this book.
Awesome. So if you just remind our viewers, if you show them the book, and to our listeners, remind them what it's called and who it's by.
So the book's title is Nobody's Victim, and it's Gary Goldberg. And it's a very, very interesting book.
Great. So guys, as always, if you have read this book or you read it as a result of watching this, then drop me a note and drop Gary a note and let us know your reviews, because we'd like to know, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's all about information sharing. So do get that book if you're looking for a new read. At the beginning, I touched on you being a fantastic presenter and speaker. Okay. Now, that's not just to butter him up, guys. He truly is, because I've seen him in action when we were recently speaking at a Congress on resilience. It's hard to present, okay, and it's not easy, and there's hundreds of books out there. But what are your key takeaways, and how did you become so good at that?
Do you mean presenting on stage? And such?
Just the general, regardless of what the topic is.
Okay. I think, again, great question. For me, it is about, one key tip I would give anybody is that when you get up to do a talk of any description, everybody's on your side. Now, I know there's lots of tips that people say when you're on stage, think of the audience in a certain way. But I always think when I'm going on stage is the audience are on your side. Okay. They want you to succeed. They don't want to see you struggle. So take a breath, relax, and just enjoy it. Okay. This is your time. This is your opportunity to get your message across. I think if you remember that really does help, because knowing that they want you to succeed, they're with you. Yeah. I think is really powerful. But other things than that, I think it's some of the obvious things that we hear about but we don't take to heart, which is it's about preparation. Yeah. If you are going to be talking on stage, people are on your side, but they have given up 20 minutes of their day for you. They have given up an hour of their day for you, or whatever it might be. Pay that some respect. So be prepared. Don't give this a 10-minute slide and then think, oh, I'll make it up, I'll wing it when I get on stage. Have a clear understanding of what the middle, the beginning, middle, and end is. You are telling a story, and it comes back to what we've already been talking about with communication. Yeah, absolutely. What do you want the audience to go away with? What ultimately do you want them to do? Do you want them to take action? In which case, your end of your presentation needs to be a call to arms, call to action. Do you want them to go away feeling engaged and passionate about your topic? In which case, don't finish with a damp squib, finish on a high. It's a story. Yes. So just like any story, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's how it is. But the final piece is find your own voice. Okay. You have a message to say, you have a message to give, you have a unique style, and just deliver it. I deliver it in a certain way, the way that I do it. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I can't alter the way that I deliver what I do. I talk a lot with my hands, I pace up and down. That's what I do. Yeah. If your style is something different, then that's your style.
Yeah. Okay, that's really great, because there's all these rules like you should, and I've been on courses where it says stand still, grounded, and like don't move around or stand behind the podium. And it's you're right. It's actually finding your own style, your own voice, and what you're most comfortable with, because that's where your personality comes out. Absolutely. And I've seen Gary in action. And definitely very engaging. Even if he was talking about something really boring, you'd probably listen, because it's just that personality that comes out. So thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for sharing those tips, because I think it's really important.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we are at an end to the interview. We've had some amazing insights from Gary, which has been awesome. He's flicking through the mood book again to tell us how he's feeling at the end of the interview. So if you remember before, he was feeling chipper. How are you feeling now?
Okay, so I've just had a quick look through. I am feeling inspired.
Awesome.
So feeling inspired through conversations with yourself. The questions that you've asked has given me an opportunity to pause for thought about why I do what I do, why our industry is so important, why resilience is so important personally, but also as from an industry perspective. So I'm feeling inspired to go out and keep on doing what I do. So hopefully it's adding benefit, and it adds benefit to your listeners and viewers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm feeling inspired.
Thank you so much. You've definitely inspired me and hopefully our viewers and listeners. Really grateful for you to come.
Thank you for asking.
All the way, no problem, on the pod, and hopefully we'll have you back some other time.
I hope so. If you get good feedback, I'll be back.
Yeah, he'll be back. So thank you once again, Gary. Guys, you've just heard and watched the Professor of Communicating Cyber. Thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in once again. We are on YouTube and on Spotify and all the other listening platforms. So do come back for more episodes and more inspirational models, real models in the resilience industry. So until next time, bye.
Bye.